Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Cole. Sunday evening, November 1st, as we move into week 12 of constitutional law for the fall 2020 term. Everyone, we'll have a quiz next week. That'll be quiz number 7. Now, for this week, we have freedom of the press on the syllabus. Next week, freedom of religion. And our quiz number 7 will be related to recent Supreme Court cases dealing with freedom of religion. We're going to take that quiz all day Tuesday, November 10th. Now, I've assigned 4 readings. I generally only assign 2 or 3. These are pretty short, but I thought they were all necessary to cover the subject matter. There were 3 important religion decisions related to freedom of religion handed down during the 2019-2020 term. Now, one of the 4 articles you'll be looking at, notice, discusses all of them. Okay. One was called Montana versus Espinoza. The second one, Little Sisters of the Poor versus Pennsylvania. And the third involved a Catholic school named after Our Lady of Guadalupe. Those were the 3 big religion cases from the 2019-2020 term. Okay, so we've got a total of 4 things for you to look at for a quiz on that material next week on the 10th. But that'll be next week. Freedom of religion is on the syllabus for next week. This week, we have freedom of the press. Okay, so you have 2 sets of class notes to look at over freedom of the press. Class notes for lectures 21 and 22. Let me just hit a couple of the highlights. Some of our most important traditions with regard to freedom of the press go back to the trial of John Peter Zenger all the way back to 1735, before even American independence was established. Now, one thing that happened in this trial, it ended up culminated with a sort of jury nullification, because the jury seemed to accept the idea of truth as a defense against a charge of libel, and that became well established in American law. In 1735, we were operating under British law, which provides for a doctrine of seditious libel. You can be punished for publishing something considered seditious, even if it's true. But the jury would not convict John Peter Zenger of seditious libel. And so that became a very important event, even before American independence was established, with regard to American attitudes toward freedom of the press. A very important doctrine with regard to freedom of the press is that we almost never allow prior restraint. It's very difficult for anyone to prevent something from being published in advance. You may be punished, conceivably, after publication, especially if what you published is regarded by the courts as libelous or obscene. And the notes for lecture 22 discuss libel and obscenity. Okay. In lecture 21, you want to look carefully at such cases as the Stanford Daily case and the Pentagon Papers case, both of which go back to the 1970s. Lecture 22 deals with libel and obscenity. One very important doctrine to make note of with regard to libel is it's more difficult to prove libel on behalf of a public figure. Okay. The courts have ruled that for the sake of freedom of speech, we cannot be too quick to award a libel judgment to a public figure. Otherwise, freedom of speech would be too constrained. So, for a public figure to successfully bring a libel suit, that public figure has to establish actual malice, which means you have to show either that the statement was deliberately made, an untrue statement deliberately made, or with reckless disregard of whether or not it was true or false. So it either has to be a deliberate falsehood or a statement made with reckless disregard of whether it was true or false to win a libel judgment as a public figure. It's harder to win a libel judgment as a public figure than as a private citizen. those are some important doctrines with regard to freedom of the press that are discussed in the class notes for lectures 21 and 22. That's on the syllabus for this week. Next week we have freedom of religion. And we sent you some material to look at for quiz number 7 next week on the 10th, I believe. Let's double check that. That's right. Tuesday the 10th, and we'll chat about that Monday night the 9th. Okay, 4 things to look at with regard to important freedom of religion decisions made in the 2019-2020 term. But that's getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. That will be next week. This week we have freedom of the press. So be looking at the material on freedom of the press, and you may wish to go ahead and start taking a look at that material for quiz number 7. And we'll say more about that in 1 week when we'll be getting to freedom of religion on the syllabus, and we'll be getting ready for quiz 7. So be taking a look at all of that, and otherwise take it easy.